Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I'm David Delaney, your host, and I'm joined today by Brendon Cassidy, who is a legend in our space. Okay, we're going to dive in on this, but this man has created more opportunities for people and has absolutely crushed his roles in the sales industry for what's going on quite a bit of time. We won't say how long, but it's absolutely great to have you here, Brendon, and thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks, David. Excited to be on with you. You and I have known each other for a long time. Never done a podcast together, so I guess that's if you know each other, you got to do a podcast these days.
Okay. All right, so everybody, get out a notepad and pen or pencil if you're old school or whatever you use, because you're going to want to take notes here. Okay. So Brendon, tell us about how you got into your sales career and then what you're doing now at CoSell.
Yeah, I won't go back. I won't name years, but back all the way back to sort of just before the .com bubble sort of burst. So 2000, sort of around there is when my career started. I actually started out as a recruiter. And so, we were working with, startups, venture-backed startups, some bigger tech companies, but mostly startups, around 2000, which, I think maybe one or two actually survived the, sort of 3 to 4 year period post .com bubble. But, sort of build my network there, learned a lot, and also learned, as the tech market imploded. I don't know how much you remember from that time, but literally the whole thing just went away basically. Yeah. And everybody left, right? So it's not that dissimilar to kind of, sort of the pandemic-y, sort of some of the migration out of the Bay Area. There's a complete migration out of the Bay Area. Literally where the commute from Mountain View to San Francisco went from 60 minutes to 30 minutes in 3 months. Learned a lot, and that was a great place to learn how to survive, right? And learn what's the level to survive in that kind of climate, and built a network there, and always knew I'd probably go into the sales side. And so I started off as an SDR at this company called OnStore many years ago, which was sort of in the sort of storage, network attached storage space, which I knew nothing about before that. And I was the only SDR. And we had one sales engineer, and then we had 4 salespeople. And I noticed that myself as the SDR and the SE were doing 90% of the work. It was very much in that traditional old school enterprise. Sales reps are taking prospects to dinner and dancing and whatever else. And so I was man, I feel we'd maybe even be in a better position if I just continued the customer relationship, considering we've done, 75% of the work. And so, sort of there, I thought, I think I could sell if I'm given the opportunity. I think I could sell probably better than a lot of these people. And then, went to this company called Spoke Software back in the day, which was sort of like a Jigsaw competitor, and funded at the same time as LinkedIn. And that was a great experience. Not a super successful company, but a successful experience for me. Moved, ultimately from a individual contributor into the leader of that team. And then LinkedIn recruited me back in 2005. Cold called me, ironically. Somebody high up, and was yeah, we know we want to sell something into recruiting. Obviously you have Spoke, you have your recruiting background, seems like a perfect fit. Went into LinkedIn, met Reed and all those people's early. It was 20 employees.
Wow.
And turned it down initially. And I got promoted again at Spoke. And then about 60 days later, I was just in the office by myself one night, just looking at them sort of side by side. And I was yeah, we lost. And they're not even trying to do anything here. They're just, and sort of the data set that LinkedIn had in this, sort of organic, opt-in, viral, you're right. There was no competing against it. And it was not going to get better over time. So I went back to LinkedIn. LinkedIn brought me in, and I said, hey, I've kind of changed my mind. I don't know if it's too late. And it wasn't too late. And so I came in as really the first go-to-market employee on the corporate solutions side for LinkedIn.
Whoa.
Tasked to build that team with no real product or resources at that point. I mean, obviously LinkedIn had this consumer internet product and some sort of online premium options. And, and they were like, hey, if you could figure out a way to make this like 15-20% of the overall revenue stream, that would be a win. And so, obviously my goal, and LinkedIn is very much a consumer internet company at that point, right? That the mentality, which anyone that knows that mentality, is very different than enterprise sort of B2B software. It's sort of a field of dreams mentality, right? If you build it, they will come. And even the concept of selling something is like, what? Why would you need to sell something? Just build it and they'll show up, right? Sort of that mentality. So I set out to, said, hey, let's go beat all there are 3 revenue streams for advertising revenue, online revenue, and then us. And then we became the predominant revenue stream of the company, which exists to this day. It's almost entirely driven by corporate solutions, which is, recruiting, sales. But that was a great experience. And obviously that was, in a room on a whiteboard trying to figure out, a pitch and a narrative that didn't exist, and really create a new category for recruiting, which we did. And so that was, a big confidence builder for me in my career. And then after that, Jason Lemkin recruited me to be the VP of sales at EchoSign, which at that point was like a 15-person startup, maybe less, in sort of the, digital signature, electronic signature, digital electronic document space. And we took that from like 2 to 70 million, something like that, over a course of time. Acquired by Adobe in 2011, spent close to 3 years at Adobe post-acquisition, which was good experience just to take a mental break. And then after that, I was the 5th employee for a company called TalkDesk, which is in the customer support cloud, now worth $10 billion, probably less on the secondary market in reality right now. But and so help them. I was part of the founding group as an advisor for a company called Gong, which is in the and helped, was basically me and the CEO. Sort of, bringing our first 50 customers together, crafting our narrative and pitch, everything. And then have advised and consulted for probably, I'll stop 70 startups through the years, right? And now obviously co-founder of this company called CoSell, which is about how to, really kind of put sort of relationship capital and referrals at the front of how we sell, instead of resorting to sort of brute force automation and mass emailing and cold calling and all that kind of stuff. That's just want us to be more strategic, because I think we're at a point now where we really don't have a choice, right? Everybody's been prospected to the same way, with the same sort of messaging and all this stuff so many times that you should do it, but it's really hard to go from where you want to go just on the backs of that anymore. You're going to need to be diverse and multifaceted in your go-to-market approach, and most aren't. So,
okay, so I want to dive into that. But one thing, there's been like a pattern, is that you come in and you try to figure out the go-to-market for a company, and what's your process like when you come in? Is it a process? Is it an empty whiteboard? How do you go about coming up with it? Obviously, the track record speaks for itself.
Yeah, I don't know that I have, I don't know that I don't have like a book on the process that I wrote. Maybe I should. I don't know. I would actually have to sit down and like define exactly what that is, right? For me, it all starts with sort of narrative and story. Can you tell your story in a way that's like sort of universally understood by anyone? Like I always tell people, like, it's amazing how many companies I've sort of helped or advised or whatever, and you get in there and they really have a hard time articulating what they do. Actually, they have a hard time articulating what they do. They have a hard time articulating what the problem is. And so it's almost like there's like a sort of cascading sort of domino effect. I view it, right? Which is like, if you don't know what the problem is, you can't possibly know what the solution is. And if you don't know those things, you can't, none of the other stuff's possible, right? Like you have to come up with a narrative and story that's, that is impossible to misunderstand. It's just blunt force, black and white. Here's the problem we solve, right? Or here's the problem, and this is how we're going to solve it. And you put a flag in the ground, and you either that's aligns with where the market already is, or that's where the market's going. And that's obviously so many startups. It's not that obvious yet, right? We're like, hey, a lot of, early days of Gong, nobody was sitting around being like, oh, God damn, I just need a call recording platform, right? That helps me, sort of summarize what my salespeople are talking about. Nobody was saying that, right? So it was all about saying, yeah, here's the problem, right? And here's a solution to that problem that sort of addresses it in a way that's never been done. And it's a no-brainer. Why would you not do this, right? Sort of that narrative around it. So I would say a lot of it is what's the problem? Hey, and can you explain the problem in a way that's impossible to misunderstand or interpret? There's certainly going to be layers to the problem that are more than one or two sentences, but like you have to start there. And I'm a huge believer in that, and that's generally worked. Do
you ever, with the companies that you have consulted, do you ever come in and the problem is just not painful enough, or do you ever get into a situation where there's just not enough there to be able to tell us a compelling story? And I won't name any names, but it's like
I would say I don't know that I've ever had a job full time, like a job that I took as a VP of sales, where we couldn't at least come up with a compelling problem and story. I mean, sometimes sometimes what you're saying the problem is and how you're solving it, it's not 100% aligned with, like it's not like, that's what you're doing. You're trying to push a narrative, right? You're taking a problem, like I'll use the example of Gong, or I'll use co-sell, 18, 24 months ago. Everyone was like, yeah, referral selling and relationship capital, that's a good idea. We should do it. Now you'll see a lot of the narrative where people are talking about this is just has to happen now, right? Like we've exhausted all the other channels, right? And so it's sort of similar in that way. And so, I would say Gong was like, a lot of people, you could probably ask 10 different people, what problem does Gong solve? They might have 10 different answers, but we started with like 75% of all salespeople fail, right? That was the problem. And, obviously we're attaching our why, because, the vast majority never actually make it out of, new hire onboarding. They never ramp. Oh, why do they never ramp? Well, like they never actually really learned how to do the job successfully. Right. And so then obviously you can sort of attach Gong to that kind of narrative. And that was a big part of the sort of problem statement in the early days, still a big part of the problem statement for them. But yeah, I've seen many startups where you're like, what's the problem? And they're like, huh? You're like, what's the problem? And they're like, I don't know. And you're like, okay, well, maybe, maybe you shouldn't have done this, that kind of thing. It's like, there's a reason why 90 out of 100, maybe more, 90 to 93 out of 100 startups don't make it. And there's, a multitude of reasons why, but there's 4 or 5 that are pretty core, one of which is you're either too early or too late, or there's no early or late. You were just wrong, right? About what the problem and what the solution and the opportunity is. And so, I've seen many of those startups through the years, and you probably have as well. You've probably been offered jobs at many of those startups through the years, and you were like, yeah, you're not going to do it, right? Like, the older you get or the more accomplished you get, the more risk averse you are. And so I tell, I've helped a lot of startup founders, sort of hire, like, how do I hire my first VP of sales or first head of sales? And they always have like big aspirations, right? Like, I want to get, here's my top 10 list. And you're like, okay, none of them are coming. So who's your next 10, right? And they're like, well, why not? I said, because no one's ever heard of you, right? And you don't have a lot of customers, and, you're a lot more risk for them than he or she is for you. That's it, right? So anyways,
Yeah. And so if they can articulate the problem to you, is that a good sign for you when you start to talk to that?
Yeah. Can you articulate the problem in a way that like a non-domain expert could understand, right? Which is, quite frankly, usually us, right? If somebody's talking about a security problem, you and I are not experts on that, right? Like, we don't, so like, you have to be able to say, hey, it's simple. This is the problem is that, companies fail because of this reason. And here's the behavior change that we think can help solve it. Maybe not solve it all the way, but help solve it. And this is how we're doing it, but there's a lot, in today's world, right? None of us get the sort of Salesforce 1999 scenario, right? Where you're like the only SaaS company selling into a space with one competitor. Now you have 1,000 other companies trying to vie for attention with really the same number of potential buyers, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what's obviously that has spurred this era of, right, where marketing, sort of driving demand gen through marketing, which used to be the norm, doesn't work anymore, period. Right. And now people have to go to 10bound or whomever else, right, and take this sort of outbound, we need to manufacture a market approach, which is hard, really, really hard, right? Most, as you know, right, most will not succeed in that endeavor.
It's diminishing returns. It's almost like antibiotic resistance,
It's not just diminishing returns. It never, I've seen some of the greatest SDR organizations ever with teams of people that all like were, 6 or 7 of them ultimately became VPs of sales, right, down the road. And like, if ultimately there has to be some alignment with, sort of your go-to-market approach and the market itself, right? Like, because it's to drive it entirely on the backs of an outbound playbook, sort of brute force, automation, sort of manufacture the market approach. And at no point does the market ever be like, yep, okay, we're here now, right? So now we're gonna come to you a little bit, right? Never. And I can't name a single company in the history of tech or software where that, so really the outbound approach, you're just on some level, right? You're trying to buy yourself time and opportunity, right? Because if nobody has any interest in what you do, right, and there's no agreement from the market, like, it's indicative that you may be too early, or or these other things. I think that's a big, on some level, like the market has to align with your direction. It's going to be hard to manufacture that from inception to IPO, right?
So interesting. I was at a conference yesterday with some really, really experienced CMOs in the tech industry, and they were saying that even at these big companies, inbound has stopped, recently, and we're just not getting any inbound. And so, being old school, it's like my initial thought is we got to go outbound. And people were asking them, in the audience, like, what are you going to do? And I think the best response one of them came up with was direct mail. We're going to send direct mail, right? And I was like, I don't know.
Dropping, flowers and donuts off in the lobby and all that. Yeah. And that's
not dissing those solutions and stuff, but you identified this issue, and now you're trying to solve this problem with COSA.
Yeah. So like my basic, it's at this point, I'm really focusing on sort of, unsolved problems in my career, right? You're like, oh, you have a list of things. You're like, someone should do that, right? You have it on this in the back of your wallet or whatever. And then through the years, you're like, oh, no one's done that, right? Or no one's focusing on that. So I have that list, and this was sort of at the top of the list, which is really just helping the people that I've been talking to and working with for 10 plus years is, what is the best way for you to go to market, right? And I'm convinced the best way to go to market is to sort of leverage the people or people around you and the relationships around you to get in front of customers, warmly, right? Warmly and through credible sort of connections. Because, cold calling and cold emailing, like it's not working, right? It's not working for people. And it's time for us to take another approach. And the reality is we have people around us, investors, advisors, friends, that can help us. They can help us get where we want to go. And it's not about like, how do I leverage my network to go to market or sell or whatever, right? It's not like that's the only approach you take. You absolutely should go outbound, right? You should try to drive inbound. You should drive through partners, right? Which is what companies like Crossbeam do, right? That you or Partner Hack or whoever, right? You should absolutely do those things, but this really, I think, is the most strategic thing, which is, utilize the people around you that have the relationships and the connections to the customers that you want to be talking to, because their relationships and their credibility are probably worth more than the name of your company in many cases, right? So, and, if need be, if you have advisors or people that are, which happens, for someone like you or me or others, right? People that are well connected, and if somebody sells to VPs of sales and marketing and we know about it, just pay them. Just, put them on your payroll, pay them a monthly subscription, $500 a month, $1,000 a month to open some doors for you and sort of use their influence to help you. It just doesn't make any sense for us to not be doing it that way, in my opinion. And so, you got to follow the things you have conviction about, and that's something I've done in my career. Like when I've had conviction, I don't care what other people say. Like, I don't care. Like when I know I'm right about this, that's paid off for me. Like I'm sure, like I don't see any other path here. Now, it's not the easiest problem to solve, by the way, right? So when you talk about leveraging relationships and referrals and the social and professional makeup, right? And friction and opportunity and all that stuff that goes into it. But so that's why it's just like, hey, David, the VP of sales for Gong. Can you make the intro? By the way, I'm going to pay you $500 a month to make 3 intros for me a month. How's that sound? And what you're going to say is, awesome. I do this. I already do it anyways, right? So if somebody wants to pay me or, sort of recognize my influence to connect 2 parties, and it's my choice, right? I choose who I work with or who I represent. If I don't believe in something, I'm not going to represent it. But these 2 parties are coming together now. And it's like, people will be like, well, it's just karma, right? No, this is $1 trillion problem, right? Like, that can't be done on the backs of karma, right? It's like people got to get paid. There's tremendous value being exchanged. And so that's what I believe in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Just talked to my wife. She's like, what do you do all day? I'm like, I'm just waiting for that karma to come back.
Yeah. I talked to this guy.
Coming any day now.
Kevin Gaither. I don't know if you know him. He's he was the CRO for ZipRecruiter. Honestly, one of the smartest sales leaders I've ever met. I've known him, or, he's actually from the Bay Area. Went to this sort of poor man St. Francis called Sarah High School. That's by the way,
that's where Tom Brady went.
It is. I actually, I opened it up. I actually played against Tom Brady in high school football.
Wow.
Played against him and handed him the worst loss of his football career. We beat him by 56. But
Nice.
full flowers for what he did after, though. Anyways, he did okay.
We'll make him a co-sell,
There you go. We'll
referral
make he's
partner.
already a co-sell. Tom, we'll make you a co-sell advisor. You're never going to see this podcast, but hey. And so I can't remember but Kevin Gaither I was talking to him and he was like, dude, my belly's full of karma, man. Right. He said, like somebody
cashing my karma checks.
Yeah, like we all have, we've conquered the karma mountain, right? Like it's like we don't need any more effing karma. Like just give us some effing money. It's not hard, right? Like everyone's looking for passive income streams and all that stuff. So if like, I know probably like 5,000 VPs of sales, you probably know 3,000, my guess, maybe more. And if somebody wants an intro, and as long as it's not being overutilized,
sure,
right? That's stuff we get asked to do all the time, and nobody gives us a damn thing for it, right? And so, like, many of us are just like, yeah, I'm just not going to do it, right? Like, okay, I get that you want the intro. I get what's in it for you, right? You want the intro, but nothing in it for me, right? Like, so like, there's not that sort of, and I think that's part of the reason why LinkedIn, which had sort of a referral or an intro button, they just sunset it, right? Because the people that had the referrals to give or the relationships to give were just like, yeah, there's nothing in this for me, right? And so we're now at a point where we're asking the question of like, what's in it for the person that's making the referral? And, like that's been a revelation for me is in talking to people like you and Kevin and all these people. They're just like, yeah, I'll take it. Give me, $500 a month, open a couple doors. I already do it anyways. I get nothing for it. Right. And so there's a market there now, right? Of people that are like, yeah, if I can drive, sort of, everyone's got a side gig. So you do, I do, we all do, right? All of us are looking to make money for as little possible effort as possible, right? And so I just believe it's right. So that's
this is really interesting. So are you disclosing to the person that you're getting?
Oh, absolutely. No, it's so we have a product. It's a sort of Chrome extension. It functions inside LinkedIn, allows you to request an intro of anyone that you're connected to, which is great. And that's useful and valuable and all that stuff. But obviously you have to have sort of tacit approval on the other side, right? Or ultimately people are like, yeah, I'll make an intro. Like, oh, what's with the second and the third ones though? Right. Like, and so, what we've done is sort of create this network. We call them like premium connectors. And these are people that are like super connected, that have, sort of recognition and brand in these certain spaces and categories. And you make them sort of like your private sort of advisory pod or whatever you want to call it. And, for 8 to 10 intros a month in your most strategic targets, that's super value add, right? So if I want to sell to Gong and Jameson Young, the VP of sales for Gong, who I know, by the way, and helped get him that job, right? So, but like if somebody wants that intro, not a lot of better people on the face of this planet to get it than through me, right? In the same way, if I want an intro to, I don't know, pick someone, right? Steve Erbst or someone else, right? Well, guess what? You have that relationship. That's somebody that you know. And so the people with the credibility and the relationships make them a partner in that endeavor. As long as you're not overutilizing it. And this is not a replacement for outreach at all, right? Outreach it's a different animal. It's saying, take what is your most strategic, best foot forward path to the market? This should be at the top of your stack. That's what I believe. Because that's what I believe. So,
and so I need to sign up right after this.
Sure.
And
if you want to be a premium connector, so we have, and so when we have a customer that sells to like, VPs of sales and CROs, we can just be like, hey, here are the people that are part of our, sort of premium connector board or advisory board, who would you want to connect with? And this is what the cost is. And they're like, hey, we'd love to have David Dulaney, right? Or I know that David Dulaney has relationships into the market we want to sell into. And then we would come back and be like, hey, David, Spiff wants to make you a premium connector, $500 a month, make 2 or 3 intros a month. Is that something you'd like to do? We feel like there's pretty good crossover with who they want to sell to and who you know. And that's it. And then they pay us, we pay you. And that's it. That's basically, it's like, all I'm trying to do is get people paid.
Yeah.
We already know the demand exists on the other side, right? That's done. Like, people want to do it, but what matters is that the people on the other side want to do it too, right?
Yeah, this is interesting because it's almost like everything that you've worked up to, in your career has led to the creation of this, and
it is. It's one of 4 or 5 unsolved, problems. That I was talking about, like, here's 4 or 5 things that problems that I've wanted solved. No one solved them, so I'll try and solve it. There's a few others, by the way, in the pocket.
Okay,
but that's
not. Do anything about graffiti? I hate graffiti. I'm showing my age here, but graffiti is horrible. It never goes away. It's a huge problem. And anyways, so I'll work on that.
It's a virtual reality thing that it's an app on virtual reality, makes you not see graffiti.
Yes. I'll take it. That's fine.
Come on, man. There's no graffiti in San Francisco. Just kidding.
Oh,
you're not in San Francisco. You're just south of it. So
well, it's just so frustrating because, like, they come once a month and spray it away. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it 8 hours and it's back. But anyways, I don't know. I honestly don't know if that's a problem. That I think it's sort of a Venn diagram, right? There's a problem that really is bugging you, and then there's the market's desire to solve that problem, and will people pay you money to solve the problem?
And those are the we've the first 2 things that we sort of, the boxes we checked were like, sort of, do customers want it, and will they pay for it? And then the second part is like, okay, this isn't, you're not just selling a product that's going to allow you to, like, send out 10,000 quasi-personalized emails, right? There's actually people involved here, right? In every transaction, right? Multiple people, in professional networks and social friction and all that kind of stuff. And so that's been sort of the realization of, like, hey, there's all these people over here that have the relationships that the people over there want. But you have to make it a win-win scenario. And so that's what this is.
The two-sided and
it's a two-sided marketplace, right? Which obviously that adds complexity to any business model, right? But LinkedIn was a two-sided marketplace, right? It was. And so what was most important to read at every time was the network itself, right? The network of people that were never going to pay LinkedIn anything, right? Every decision and priority and preference was given to that community. And anybody that wanted to make money off of that had to be, like, hey, got to be a win-win scenario, right? That's why recruiting, which was, hey, if Salesforce is reaching out to David Dulaney and saying, we want to hire you to run our SDR team, that's a win for David. He may say no, but we can squint and see the win in every scenario, right? Versus, like, other scenarios where it's not quite so clear, And
you said something really important in that they really were focused on the experience of the free members to make sure that they had a great experience, because that's what makes them want to come back and engage, right, in the community. And then the secondary almost was the monetization. And
it was secondary, maybe tertiary in some cases, right? It was like,
that's interesting.
It was, Reed was going to be the gatekeeper to the network. Anything that was going to be shown to them or sold to them, it would be his decision about what sort of made it to the end of the line. And honestly, like, I think that's probably the most important decisions he ever made in the history of the company was actually keeping people away from the network. Because everybody wants to monetize something sooner, right, than later, right? And certainly in Reed's case or LinkedIn's case, there are plenty of people around it, board, investors, otherwise, that wanted to, hey, how do we make money, right? How do we make money off this thing that you built faster? And he didn't, he was just like, sort of like, it has to be viral. Like, there has to be sort of viral growth where we don't have to pay to, sort of grow the network and grow the number of users, right? He's like, if you have to buy that, there's nothing special about that. I think that's kind of his mentality around it. And so, yeah, he was like the one sort of, protecting the network of like, okay, show me something that I'll sign off. I want to make money, but not at the expense of that. And that became recruiting, right? Recruiting became, sort of that sort of win-win monetization play. And it worked pretty well, and that was the whole pitch was, we only sell to like corporate or enterprise. We don't sell to third-party recruiters. We don't sell to recruiting agencies. So we eliminated them in our go-to-market approach, because that was the whole pitch was, we don't sell to them. We're selling to you, right? So that you don't have to use them, right? That was kind of the part of the pitch.
Okay.
Because that's
still the case.
What's that?
Is that still the case with the recruiter product?
No.
Okay.
Eventually,
initially you could see
that won the market, right? And then eventually you get to a point where you're like, this is long after I was there, of where it's like, okay, we just need to, right? Every decision is around, squeezing the juice and optimizing revenue. And so they long past that sort of point. I'm assuming they probably had sort of different, some product limitations around it, one versus the other, but yeah, ultimately everybody, usually if you want to be around long enough, usually everybody caves to that. Caves to that, so.
Oh my gosh. Well,
but had we not done that, I think it would have been a different outcome, right? Because now people would have been getting reached out to by headhunters being like, hey, I have an opportunity for you at a company that I won't even tell you who, right? And you're like, oh, well, who's that? And they're like, can't tell you, man.
That's annoying.
Like, that's not a win, right? And the same way that, like, in many cases, somebody asking for an intro, right, of which there's no real gain for you to make the intro. If you're not in the karma market, right, then it's not a win. So that's why I'm just like, let's just dispense with just pay them, right? They want, they'll take the money, they make the intros anyways, they get nothing for it. Just pay them for what they have, for their knowledge and influence and connections. So that's where we're at, man.
And I think your phone's going to be like ringing out the hook for people wanting your consulting work after this. Every startup,
no,
but you're focused on co-sell right now.
I mean, we're a seed startup, right? So, we're not doing the like, let's buy Porsches and buy a yacht or anything, right? So we are bootstrap-ish, right? And then we're in, so I actually do have some clients. It's sort of parallel, right? To sort of, keep the revenue or keep the inbound revenue where it needs to be. So, yeah, I'm not doing a ton of consulting, but I'm doing some consulting. So,
all right. Yeah. If you can, I mean, so you can field those inbounds and, people listening to this, go back, and I'm sure that you've done a lot of interviews like this over the years and almost study your approach, because I bet there's a lot of startup founders and salespeople out there who really, really need to hear this.
Yeah. Appreciate the time.
Definitely.
If anybody wants to follow up with me sort of offline or, through LinkedIn or whatever, happy to connect, but yeah, appreciate it. And it's always great to get on a podcast with a UC Santa Cruz alum. That's that makes my day.
There's a few of us out
there. It's not St. Mary's, right? It's not like Harvard of the West St. Mary's, right? But it's great. I've been in a St. Mary's. My college St. Mary's. I've been on a St. Mary's sort of rebranding effort for about 20 years. So. I've been calling it Harvard of the West, right? Just to see if I continue to say it over and over again. People think, oh, that's like almost like an Ivy League school.
I love it. It's a one-man rebranding. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, people think it's. By the way, people think it's pretty funny, and some people might believe it. And I'll take either reaction.
It is. Your stock is rising for sure. So,
all right, man.
Great, man. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you over. It's cosell.co, right?
Cosell, COSELL.io.
.io. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we bought the .co domain, okay. So I won't speak to that, but it is cosell.io, and we have new companies onboarding and new customers coming in. We're also adding premium co-sellers. So if that's something that's interesting to you, that's 100% upside for you.
Okay.
So a lot of what we're doing, connecting.
I'm doing it. I'm going to be on the leading edge of this because I think you're onto something. So,
all right, man. Sounds great.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.